Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. This time we're looking at ancient Rome and how they shifted from a monarchy to a republic.
And how that shift impacted Europe in some huge ways.
It's really fascinating how we can see traces of that Roman system, even in modern democracies today.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just think about the story of Lucretia, the Roman noblewoman who was raped.
Right, by the king's son, no less.
Exactly. It was a horrific event that sparked outrage.
It wasn't just a personal tragedy either. It became a symbol of the king's tyranny and abuse of power.
And, the Roman people were already fed up. They'd had enough of the monarchy.
So Lucretia's story was the last straw.
It was the final push that led them to revolt.
And they were led by Lucius Junius Brutus, who vowed to never let Rome be ruled by a king again.
And this is where things get really interesting. Instead of just picking a new king, they created the position of consul.
So they decided to share the power, instead of giving it all to one person.
Yeah. They split the king's power between two elected officials. Each consul would serve for just 1 year, and they'd share administrative and military powers.
So like appointing officials, leading armies, basically being the face of Rome.
Exactly.
It sounds pretty good on paper. Two heads are better than one, as they say. But I'm guessing it wasn't always smooth sailing.
Well, you're right. Each consul could veto the other's decisions.
Oh, so they could block each other.
Yeah, and that could cause major gridlock, especially during a crisis.
Can you imagine trying to make a war strategy with two people who can overrule each other?
It could be a disaster.
So it sounds like they traded one problem for another. Tyranny for potential paralysis.
Yeah, it was a trade-off for sure. But they did come up with a solution for those really dire situations.
Okay.
When they needed to act fast.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
They created the position of dictator.
Hold on, a dictator. Didn't they just get rid of a king to avoid that kind of rule?
It might seem that way, but it wasn't the same. This dictator wasn't a permanent ruler.
So it was more like a temporary emergency power.
Exactly. They'd appoint a dictator for a limited time, just to deal with a specific crisis.
And then once the crisis was over, the dictatorship ended and the power went back to the consuls.
That's right.
It's like a temporary power boost
Yeah.
to get things done quickly when they really needed to.
Yeah, a way to bypass the gridlock.
But absolute power can be dangerous, right? How do they make sure these dictators didn't abuse their power?
Well, there were a few safeguards in place. First, the dictator's term was strictly limited, usually just 6 months.
So not much time to do too much damage.
Right. And second, the Senate chose the dictator, not through hereditary succession like a king.
So there was at least some accountability there.
Exactly. And then there was the fasces.
The fasces. What's that?
It was this intimidating symbol of the dictator's power. Imagine a bundle of rods bound together with an axe head sticking out.
Ooh, that sounds pretty intense.
No, it was. The dictator's bodyguards, the lictors, would carry it around. It definitely sent a message.
Yeah, I can see how that would make people think twice before challenging the dictator. But isn't it interesting how that symbol has evolved?
You mean how fascist comes from the Latin fasces?
Yeah, it's gone from a symbol of authority to something with really negative connotations.
It really shows how symbols can change over time. They reflect the shifting values of society.
It's like looking back through history and seeing how it shapes our present. But let's get back to Rome. We've talked about the consuls and the dictator. But what about the Senate? Where do they fit into all of this?
Well, the Senate had been around under the monarchy. They were advisors to the king. But in the Republic, they became a powerful force. They drafted laws, approved treaties, controlled finances. Basically, they had a huge say in how Rome was run.
That sounds a lot like the U.S. Senate today.
You're right. There are some parallels there.
So the Roman Senate was like the backbone of the Republic. They provided stability and continuity.
Exactly. They played a crucial role in guiding Rome's policies and shaping its destiny.
So far, we've been focusing on the elites, the consuls, the dictator, the Senate. But what about the everyday people, the average Romans? Did they have any power in this new republic?
That's a great question. And it's where things get even more interesting. The Roman Republic wasn't a perfect democracy, not by a long shot. In the early years, the patricians, the wealthy elite, held most of the power.
So the plebeians, the common people, didn't have much say.
Not really. They had limited rights and very little influence in government.
So even though they got rid of the king, it doesn't sound like much changed for the average person.
You're right. It wasn't a complete victory for everyone. But the plebeians weren't content to just sit back and be ignored. They wanted a share of the power, a voice in the decisions that affected their lives.
And that's where their fight for rights and representation began.
Exactly. And it's a truly fascinating chapter in Roman history.
I can't wait to hear more about it.
Oh, it's a good one. In 494 BC, just 15 years after the Republic was founded, Rome was in the middle of another war. And the plebeian soldiers, the backbone of the army, decided they'd had enough.
What did they do?
They went on strike.
In the middle of a war?
Yep, they walked off the job, marched right out of the city, and set up camp on a nearby hill.
They basically said, we're not fighting your wars until you listen to us.
That's exactly it. It was a brilliant tactic, a nonviolent protest. And it sent shockwaves through Roman society.
I bet it did. The patricians must have panicked.
Oh, they did. Their army was crippled and they had enemies at their doorstep. They had to do something.
So what happened?
They realized they couldn't ignore the plebeians any longer. The Republic's survival depended on their cooperation.
So they had to negotiate.
Exactly. And out of those negotiations came a new institution, one that would change the balance of power in Rome forever.
Tell me more.
It was the Plebeian Assembly.
So the plebeians finally got a platform.
They did. It was composed entirely of plebeians. It gave them a way to voice their concerns and elect their own officials. It was. They could pass laws to protect their own interests. And they even had representatives called tribunes of the plebes.
Okay, what did the tribunes do?
They had the power to veto decisions made by the Senate or the consuls.
Veto power, like the
Oh, yeah.
consuls had.
That's right.
So these tribunes, these representatives of the common people, could actually block the decisions of the elites.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
It was a revolutionary concept. It gave ordinary citizens a real way to challenge the status quo.
Those tribunes must have been seen as heroes.
Oh, absolutely. They were the voice of the plebeians, their champions in the halls of power.
It's like watching the seeds of democracy being planted.
It really is. But Roman government was getting pretty complex. They had all these assemblies and officials.
Well, they had the Centuriate Assembly and the Plebeian Assembly. And then they created another one, right?
Yeah, the tribal assembly. It was based on where people lived, not their social class.
So it included both patricians and plebeians.
It did.
Okay. So how did all these assemblies work together? Did they just clash all the time?
No, it was actually a pretty sophisticated system. Each assembly had specific roles and powers.
So they each had their own area of responsibility.
Exactly.
But who had the final say?
All three assemblies together formed the Roman People's Assembly. That was the ultimate source of authority in the Republic.
So it wasn't just a simple majority rule system.
Not at all. It was this complex dance of power between different groups, with different assemblies influencing different areas.
Fascinating. But what about those tribunes, those champions of the people? Were they truly powerful, or was it all just for show?
Well, on paper, they had a lot of power. They could veto any decision by the Senate or the consuls. They could stop any law or action they thought was harmful to the plebeians.
So they were like the ultimate defenders of the people.
In theory, yes, but in practice, things were a bit more complicated.
Oh, how so?
For one thing, their veto power didn't apply during times of war.
And Rome was pretty much always at war, right?
Pretty much. So in times of crisis, the needs of the state often trumped the rights of the people.
That's unfortunately something we see throughout history. When things get tough, individual rights often take a back seat.
It's true. But there's another interesting twist to the Tribune's story. The patricians, who were initially suspicious of them, realized they could actually be useful.
Useful? How?
They saw that the tribunes were popular with the people. So if they could get them on their side, it would be much easier to pass laws and influence public opinion.
So they went from adversaries to allies.
In a way, yes.
But weren't the tribunes supposed to represent the people, not the elites?
They were, but sometimes those lines got blurred. There were times when tribunes became more like mouthpieces for the patricians.
That's a bit disappointing.
It is. It raises questions about the nature of representation and how easily it can be manipulated.
Well, let's switch gears for a moment. I want to talk about a symbol we often associate with the Roman Republic. SPQR.
Oh yeah, SPQR. It stands for Senatus Populusque Romanus, which means the Senate and people of Rome.
Right, I knew it had something to do with the Senate and the people. It's on all sorts of Roman stuff. Coins, monuments, banners.
That's everywhere.
So it's like the official motto of the Roman Republic.
Actually, that's a common misconception. SPQR doesn't appear until much later in Roman history, around 80 BC.
Really? So it wasn't around during the early Republic?
Not at all. It became popular later when people looked back on the Republic with nostalgia. It became shorthand for the ideals and values of that era.
But it wasn't actually used during the Republic's heyday?
Nope.
That's interesting.
It's more like a cultural symbol than an official title. It represents the idea of shared power between the Senate and the people.
Which is a concept that has resonated throughout history.
Absolutely.
Okay, now let's talk about a figure we haven't mentioned yet. Publius Valerius Publicola.
Ah, yes, Valerius.
He played a big role in shaping the early republic, along with Brutus.
He did. He was a big advocate for the rights of the people. And he helped create the office of the Tribune.
It's amazing how these individuals shaped the course of history.
I know. Their legacy continues to inspire us today.
It's a testament to the power of human will and the desire for freedom.
Absolutely. But their journey was far from over. The early republic was a turbulent time, as different factions fought for power.
And the republic itself was tested time and again.
It was a period of great change and upheaval.
So we've laid the groundwork. We've seen how the Roman Republic emerged from monarchy, how it dealt with power struggles and competing interests, and how it developed this complex system of governance.
We've covered a lot of ground.
But there's still so much more to explore, like how this system, born out of revolution and compromise, shaped the course of Western civilization,
And what were its strengths and weaknesses?
and ultimately what led to its downfall.
Those are all questions we'll delve into next time.
So stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into the Roman Republic.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Roman Republic. Before we move on, it's important to remember that this shift from monarchy to republic, it wasn't like flipping a switch. It was a long process, full of compromises and power struggles, even with all the changes they made, like the Plebeian Assembly and the Tribunes. The fight between the plebeians and patricians didn't just stop.
So even after gaining some power, the plebeians didn't just sit back and relax.
Not at all. They were persistent, and they knew how to use their new power to push for more change.
Like those walkouts during the war, those secessions, were those a one-time thing?
Nope, they actually did that several more times over the next few decades, each time forcing the patricians to make concessions.
So they kept the pressure on. What were they fighting for in those later secessions?
Each one had its own specific goals, but they all came back to the same core issues: more representation in government, fair economic policies, and protection from the arbitrary power of the patricians.
Basically wanting to ensure the system truly served them, not just the interests of the wealthy few. It's amazing how those struggles, those demands for justice and equality, they resonate so much with us today.
It's true. It shows that human desire for fairness and dignity, it's timeless. Will feel relevant even now.
Makes you realize the fight for a just society. It's never really over. It's an ongoing journey. So how did those later secessions play out? Were they as impactful as that first one?
The results varied, but each one chipped away at the patricians' power and expanded the rights of the plebeians.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. One secession led to the creation of the plebeian aedile, that was a new office responsible for public works, and things like those huge Roman games and festivals.
Oh, wow. So they had a say in entertainment, too.
Yeah, they did. Another secession secured the right for plebeians to marry patricians.
So they broke down that social barrier between the classes.
Exactly.
It sounds like they were steadily gaining ground.
They were. It was a gradual process, but they were definitely reshaping the power dynamics of the republic.
It's incredible how they actively built a more inclusive system.
It really is. It shows their tenacity and political skill.
I imagine those changes didn't come easily. Weren't the patricians resisting every step of the way?
Of course. They weren't just going to give up their power without a fight.
But somehow the republic didn't fall apart.
I know, it's remarkable. Despite those tensions, they managed to avoid complete chaos.
How did they do that?
They found ways to manage the conflicts, to negotiate and compromise, even when things were really heated.
So they found a way to make it work.
They did. And that ability to find common ground, to hammer out those compromises, it was key to the republic's longevity.
That's such an important lesson, especially in today's world,
Yeah.
where political polarization is so high.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that compromise isn't a bad thing. It's often necessary for finding lasting solutions.
So we've talked about this evolution, this back and forth between the patricians and plebeians. But did the Roman Republic actually achieve true equality, justice for all its citizens?
That's a question historians still debate. There's no doubt the Roman Republic was a remarkable achievement. It was innovative, a testament to self-governance. It wasn't perfect. Roman society still had slaves. Women's rights were limited. And wealth and status still played a huge role.
So not quite a utopia then.
No, definitely not. But they did lay the groundwork for many principles that we value today. representative government, the rule of law, the protection of individual rights.
Almost like they planted the seeds for democracy.
That's a great way to put it. And those seeds would eventually sprout and grow in different ways in different parts of the world.
Leaving a lasting legacy.
Exactly.
So while the Roman Republic is long gone, its influence is still felt today.
Absolutely. It's both an inspiration and a cautionary tale.
In what way?
It shows us the power of collective action, the importance of compromise, and the ongoing struggle for a just society.
It also shows us that even the most innovative systems aren't immune to corruption and decay.
That's right.
This deep dive has been so insightful. I feel like I've learned so much about Rome and about our own political systems. So where do we go from here? What's next in our exploration?
Well, we've seen how the Republic emerged, how it dealt with conflict and power struggles, and how it developed this complex system of government.
Right.
But how did this system, once confined to a single city, expand into this massive empire?
Wow, the Roman Empire.
What drove that expansion, and what were the consequences?
Those are some big questions.
They are, and we'll explore them in our next segment, so stay tuned.
We're back for the final part of our deep dive into the Roman Republic. It's been quite a journey.
It has.
From monarchy to this complex system of governance, with all its triumphs and struggles.
It really shows you how a society can evolve over time.
But there's one big question still hanging. How did this city-state become a vast empire? An empire that shaped Western civilization?
That's a question that has fascinated historians for ages.
That's the Roman Empire, everyone knows. Right?
Exactly. And the simple answer is expansion.
Okay, but lots of civilizations throughout history have expanded. What made Rome different?
Well, they were definitely good at conquering.
Oh, I bet.
I mean, the Roman legions were a force to be reckoned with.
Disciplined and organized.
Exactly. They were masters of warfare, adaptable and effective.
But it wasn't just brute force, was it?
No, it wasn't. They also used diplomacy, strategic alliances, and they were willing to incorporate conquered people into their system.
So a bit more nuanced than just crushing their enemies.
Right.
They gave people a reason to join them.
Yeah, instead of just subjugating everyone, they offered things like autonomy and even citizenship.
Wow, so you could become a Roman citizen even if you weren't originally from Rome.
Exactly. It was a way to pacify conquered regions, turn potential enemies into allies.
Smart.
It helped create a more stable and integrated empire.
So they built this massive empire, spanning vast territories and different cultures.
And it all started with survival.
Survival.
Remember those early years of the Republic?
Yeah.
All those internal conflicts and power struggles?
Oh yeah, it was pretty turbulent.
Well, it wasn't just internal.
You mean?
Rome was surrounded by hostile neighbors, tribes, city-states, all competing for resources and land.
So they were under constant threat.
Pretty much. Every expansion, every conquest, it started as a way to secure their borders, protect their trade routes, keep their citizens safe.
That makes sense.
They had to fight to survive.
But I guess success can be addictive.
Oh, absolutely.
Did those early defensive wars, did they turn into something more?
You bet.
I mean, Rome became powerful and confident.
As they grew stronger, their ambitions also grew.
It went from survival to dominance.
Exactly. They started to see themselves as the rightful masters of the Mediterranean.
Destined to rule a vast empire.
It's a classic story, isn't it?
It is, unfortunately. A nation starts out with good intentions, defending its interests, but then gets swept up in expansion and
It's
conquest.
a cautionary tale.
And for Rome, it led to the downfall of the Republic.
The very system that had made them strong.
It's almost poetic.
It's ironic, for sure. The Republic was designed to prevent one person from having too much power.
Right. That's why they got rid of the monarchy in the first place.
But then they became an empire.
With an emperor.
It's a reminder that power can corrupt.
No matter how good your intentions are. So how did this transition actually happen?
Well, as Rome's territory expanded, so did their wealth and power.
And that created opportunities for ambitious individuals.
Exactly. Generals returning from victorious campaigns with tons of money and loyal armies.
And that started to undermine the old system.
Right. The Republic, with its shared power and consensus building, it was too slow for these ambitious generals.
They wanted to make things happen quickly.
They craved decisive action, and they were willing to bend or break the rules to get it.
And that led to civil war.
It did. These generals, backed by their armies, they fought for control of Rome.
So it was the old guard versus the new power players.
That's a great way to put it.
Those who believed in the Republic versus those who wanted individual glory.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a peaceful transition, was it?
Not at all. It was brutal and bloody.
Generals rising to power, then being overthrown.
A constant cycle of instability and chaos.
And the Republic was crumbling.
It was on the brink of collapse.
It's kind of sad, isn't it, to see this innovative system fall apart?
It is. But it teaches us that no system is perfect.
And that power can corrupt even the best intentions.
A lesson that's still relevant today.
This deep dive has been amazing. We've seen the Roman Republic rise and fall.
A story full of twists and turns.
And it leaves us with a lot to think about.
It does.
If a system as balanced as the Roman Republic could collapse under the weight of empire,
What does that mean for our own systems?
are we doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past?
That's the question we all have to grapple with.
The Roman Republic offers valuable lessons about the challenges of governance, the importance of civic engagement, and the need to protect liberty, justice, and accountability.
It's up to us to learn from history.
To make sure power serves the people.
And not the other way around.
Well said. On that note, we come to the end of our deep dive. It's been a pleasure exploring the Roman Republic with you.
I agree.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.